We are now live and there's a 1 thumbs up. So as usual, just because we're trying to perfect this as we go, if there is a listener, please let us know how the audio is to you guys. Well, I just chat a little bit with Caleb here to test his sound as well. There is one. Yeah, there's definitely at least one person watching. So if you can let us know in the chat, please, what the audio is like. And Caleb, if you just say something so that we can. Oh, wow, I can't hear you at all now. What the hell's going on here? Oh, wait, I have to add you. That's right. There you are. Yeah, sorry, I hadn't added you to the screen. So, okay, I can hear you now, and hopefully so can they. And that Lone Ranger out there, please tell us what the audio sounds like.
Yeah, I thought it was funny that when you were talking to David the Good,
Yeah.
I got a kick out of the fact that it sounded like he was on the other side of a canyon. So I just kind of imagined overhearing this conversation with all this echo. It was kind of funny.
Okay, well, hopefully the first date he says audio good. Okay, is that for both of us? Your audio, my audio is 5x5. What about Caleb? Yeah, I like how these guys use all these technical audio terms and they mean absolutely nothing to me. It's like 5x5, maybe from TV, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not a tech savvy guy. My computer's old as dirt.
Well, this one is not that old, but Caleb's audio is excellent too. Perfect. Thank you, Sam. All right, so without further ado, we're only like 2 minutes in and we sorted the audio. Awesome. One quick announcement is that I've enabled the subscription to the YouTube channel, and there's like 3 levels of it. There's like a $2.99, a $5.99, and a $22.99 a month, I think, in pounds, or I think it's pounds or dollars. I can't remember. Anyway, I want to get at least like 10 subscribers before I do like stuff, for the subscribers. And if the guys go for the royalty package, the 22 one, I'm just trying to make sure that they'll get also a Kurgan TV thing, but that'll probably only kick in, once we have like, I don't know, at least 10 of those guys or something like that. And of whatever level, if we get 10 people, then I'll start doing things just for them now and then, or, try and give them some freebies or do something. I don't know exactly what, but we'll figure it out. It's sort of a test run to see if people told me they were interested and they wanted to have subscription only stuff. Some of the stuff I've put on the community thing on YouTube, so you can read there the kind of things I'm thinking of doing. And one of them would be like to have subscribers have interviews if they want, or maybe come up with topics and I'll cover the topics they want me to cover on, that sort of thing. Okay, that's enough of that, because as you all know, I suck at marketing. And the other thing, which Caleb noticed on the last stream, is I have been far from well. So if halfway through this I just phlegm all over the screen and drop dead, it's not good. Otherwise, it'll be fine. It's just been a bit hectic. Like I've had this back injury. I had to be on my, basically not be able to do anything for several weeks now. And that's sort of a lot better now, so I have to start doing a bit of work on like getting the muscles to take up the slack. I don't know if I've injured the disc or not. I'm not really interested in knowing, because most people have some disc injury, but they just don't even know about it. And I've spoken to people that had pretty serious disc injuries and they just worked on it and became better. Okay. Sam is educating me about audio. Hello, Slanty Chauffeur. He says 5 is max loudness, 5 is max clarity. The scale goes from 1 to 5. An all-time radio operator's idiom. Thank you, sir. Anyway, now the reason I got Caleb here is because he is also a convert to Catholicism, proper Catholicism, which of course means he's Sedevacantist. But I'm going to let him take over and tell us his story. Ideally, Caleb, if you can tell us a little bit of your religious background at least, or whatever you want to tell us about yourself. and how you came to Sedevacantism or Catholicism.
Yeah, like I said, I'll try not to get too lost in the finer details, but I I was born and raised into a Protestant family, but I wouldn't say that I had a Protestant upbringing. There was no catechism, no Bible teaching or anything like that.
Okay.
Uh, we let's see, my parents stopped going to church by the time I was probably 3 or 4, and that was pretty much it. Every now and then we'd hear some scripture told to us, but that was about the extent of it.
Yeah.
Um, I tried religion on my own at about 14, and got mixed up with some friends that were going to a liberal, non-denominational kind of Protestant church.
Were they one of the, like,
And to
what
me,
I
it was,
call the what I call the Protestant strippers, or they were the ones that jump up and clap and stuff, or no?
oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, what I always find funny thinking back to that is there were two churches that I was going to at different times. They always started out saying that they were non-denominational, and
Mm.
within a year or two, all of a sudden they would change to Protestant or Pentecostal.
All right.
And but what it really was word of faith, name it and claim it, Jesus wants you to be rich kind of stuff. And by the time that happened the second time, that's pretty much where I started to really question a lot of their so-called theology. Um, so that lasted for a few years. By the time I was 17, I had a falling out. I'd had enough of it,
Yeah.
and
Well, that's quite a long run for a
I,
kid, like 14 to 17. That's
yeah,
three years. That's pretty solid.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and like I said, I just had enough of it because everything that they were telling me that should be and should work just wasn't working.
Yeah.
And of course, we can look into it now and see they're kind of blaming the victim when they say, well, if these things aren't coming to you, well, you don't have enough faith or you're not tithing enough or whatever it is.
Yeah. If you don't get the
Uh,
Learjet that Joel Osteen has, you're obviously not praying hard enough. That's that. I mean, it's probably obviously the problem.
right. And the thing was, I wanted to believe. I was reading my Bible,
Yeah.
and I was getting mixed up with youth groups and trying to get to know the leadership and all of that stuff. And by the end of it, I just got so fed up with it. I said, you know what? I want to believe in this. I want to believe in God. I don't care if God shows up or the devil, but one of y'all needs to show up and prove to me,
Yeah.
which way or the other.
Yeah.
And of course, neither one of them showed up. And that started about a decades long life of hedonism and debauchery, and
As
I
you
was
do.
just gonna
Yeah.
live my life. Yeah, I was just gonna live my life.
That's the logical
That
man's
ended
approach. Yeah.
right. That ended by the time I was about 28. I lost a friend and a family member, and it really made me think about life and God and afterlife.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I was real big into listening to Owen Benjamin and Gavin McInnes at that time,
Yeah.
and I was watching a video of with Gavin McInnes, and he was giving his explanation for the proof of God,
Mm.
and it had something to do with math and infinity, and I'm a math guy, and I listened to it, and I said, you know what? That's good enough for me. I believe in God now.
Yeah.
Now I don't know what, but I believe in God.
Yeah. So just sorry to
So
to to just get a little bit of detail on that, just because I think it's quite interesting for some people, perhaps. Was that as a result of you realizing that the maths just doesn't add up for a 14, 15, whatever, even 20 billion year old universe? There's just not enough time the very basic blocks and of life to even form randomly. There's just nowhere near enough time. Was that it, or was it
I
something
don't
else?
even think I don't even think it was that deep. I
Okay.
think he really made a pretty weak argument, but like I said, at that time I was looking for something,
Yeah.
and even though I had been this radical militant atheist for 10 years or more,
Yeah.
I still had this weighing conscience that never went away.
Yeah.
Uh, and then with the loss of my friend, man, I was just in the right place at the right time for that argument.
Yeah.
Um, so I stayed there as a deist for a couple of years, and then I started listening to you and Vox Day and E. Michael Jones and all of these conservative right leaning
Yeah.
figures, and started getting more conservative in my political views. And then all of a sudden, I realized all of these guys are Christians or Catholics of some kind. Um,
Well, except Owen.
right, yeah, I know that now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, I don't really know the finer details of how it all played out, but I realized I really need to believe in a religion, but which God?
Yeah.
And the only one at that time made sense. That made sense was Christian. But then you start asking yourself,
Which
well,
Christian?
which church?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was listening to all these different Protestant preachers, all the mainstream ones that you see on YouTube, and a lot of them had good things to say. It was nice conservative views that I was looking for,
Yeah.
but they are all going under different names. And so I said, this is ridiculous. Look, all of you guys are telling me that there's one God, there's one Christ, there's one Bible, there's one church, and yet all of y'all have different beliefs on who this guy is.
And what you've got to
So
do or
I
not
got,
do.
I
Yeah.
got, yeah. So I got fed up, and I did what anybody in my generation does, and I Googled it.
Yeah.
I said, I want to know who are the first Christians, what happened to them, where are they now?
Yeah.
Now, I have since done this again, and the algorithm has changed.
Yeah.
But when I did it, it said the Catholic Church, founded by Jesus Christ in 33 AD.
Yeah.
And I said, there is no way I'm going to be Catholic with these,
Yeah.
these freaks and all the
Yeah.
stuff that they're doing.
Yeah.
We all hear the rumors about
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
Catholic
Oh,
Church.
they're not rumors. I mean, the present pretend church is filled with that
Yeah.
sort of stuff.
Well, we all know the stigma.
Yeah.
Um, so I started looking. I said, well, okay, I want to know the history. I started digging into the history, and the more I was even listening to Novus Ordos,
Yeah.
and a lot of them were making very good arguments on why Catholicism is right and true, which was funny because this was all post Vatican II.
Yeah.
Apparently, they didn't read that.
Yeah.
Um, and the more I was doing this research, the more I kept hearing people talk about the problems of Vatican II and what happened after Vatican II. And the more I dug and dug, it was like, okay, everybody can pretty much agree that there was this major shift with Vatican II, but
Yes.
nobody is really directly addressing the problem,
Yep.
which is Vatican II.
Yep. No one's talking about it.
Right. So it kind of tells me if all of these things happened after Vatican II, maybe the problem was Vatican II.
Yeah.
So I think sometime during all of this, um, I got a hold of Taylor Marshall's book Infiltration.
Oh, it's that's such a badly written book, and it's got some
In
stuff
hindsight, I
in
know
there.
that now.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a pathetic little effort, and it's almost like it's ghost written by a dyslexic 12-year-old. But yeah, I
Yeah.
suppose if you don't know anything, it gives you some context. Yeah,
And I think by this point, I was already aware of you, and I'm sure I'd heard some things that you had said about the Catholic Church, but I wasn't really putting together the whole Sedevacantism thing.
yeah,
Uh, so really, the only information that I had on Sedevacantism was that one-page chapter that he had in that book
yeah,
that basically said, "Oh, that's not even an option. Let's not even talk about it."
yeah,
And he moved on, and but there was something about that book that made me realize, wait a minute, there's always been problems in the church.
yeah,
So, all these things that we hear about, facts are facts. And if this is the one true church and this is my only real promise to salvation, I'm going to go this route until I know better.
yeah,
So I went down the road to the local Novus Ordo church, got to talking to the priest, and when I went in for our first meeting, I had the Bible, which I think was King James that I had at the time.
yeah,
I had, I think I had a John Paul II catechism,
yeah.
and I had infiltration.
Right.
And he sat down in front of me, and he just goes, ah, like he was preparing for this argument of a conversation. He goes,
Yeah.
"Well, I see what you've got there. I suspect that you're probably some kind of Protestant here to challenge me on our beliefs." And I said, "No, actually, I've been reading through this, and it all sounds good. Where do I start?"
Yeah. That's
And he
awesome.
just kind of
Yeah.
took him back, and he said, "That's not what I was expecting. So, okay, let's talk for a while." And some time goes by. I start RCIA,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I was probably in RCIA for about a month or two, and I landed on one of your videos where you were just completely railing into Vatican II and
Yeah.
all of it.
In my dulcet
And that,
tones.
yes, yes, you were very polite about it. But
Yeah.
the thing was, I was far enough into understanding the history and the faith and what Catholics are actually supposed to believe that I realized what you were saying.
Yeah. It's sort of now you've got
And
enough pieces to sort of put the puzzle a
mhm,
bit together. Yeah.
yeah, and that's when I went, oh crap, am I in the wrong place?
That's
So
I
I
got a
actually have
question.
put,
Sorry to interrupt you a little bit, but I've got a. It's very interesting because you seem to be one of the very few people who's able to change his mind based on facts. These are like hen's teeth, these kind of people. Most people only change their mind due to rhetoric or emotions or something that happens to them personally. And you said you're a maths guy, so I was just wondering
mhm.
if you've noticed that about yourself or comparing, to other people, that you're able to like sift information for objective things and then make your decisions based on that. Is that something you're aware that you do, or?
It's more clear to me now. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good.
The thing about it was when I got to that part in the Bible where it says, "I am the way," capital T there.
Yeah.
So anything that is true is of God. So we
Exactly.
have
So
to face facts.
that's very good. That's awesome, actually. That's almost like a rhetorical thing leading you to dialectic thinking. It's quite interesting. I'm fascinated by that sort of stuff. So, oh, and guys in the chat, if you want to ask questions or whatever, just throw them in there. We will get to them. I will read them. Right. So you came across my rants and then sort of had another shift.
yeah, so that freaked me out so bad that I actually had to put that on hold. And I said, look, I get what this guy is saying, but I'm not quite there yet. So let
Yeah,
me just continue what I'm doing and I'll come back. And and I did. It was probably another few months. And I said, okay, let's go back to this Kurgan guy. And of course, you had more videos by then.
yeah,
And I binge watched everything I could. And man, you made such an argument. And of course, I was doing more research by that time too,
yeah.
looking into the Freemasonic history of the battle of the church and everything. And finally, at some point, I went to my RCIA class, which was just me and the priest, by the way. And
So
I,
packed.
I started. Yeah, there's nobody else looking to be one of the Novus Ordites.
Yeah,
So I started grilling the guy a little bit. I started asking him all these questions, and I liked the guy, but
yeah.
every answer he was giving me
A
was just
dodge.
more milk toast, limp wristed, yeah, dodges that you see on the news coming from the Vatican, whatever it is.
That reminds me. Have
And the
you? I
more
don't.
he would,
Sorry, I don't know if you've seen it. Tony Lowe. I had the interview with him on the last thing. Go to in
yes,
that chat. There is a link to his Amazon thing. Go there and he's written a very short book, which is a series of emails between him and a Novus Ordo priest, which he vetted through me. Like every exchange, he sort of said, "What do you think about this?" and "What do you think about that?" and I'd give him my response. And he kept it, he kept it very polite, very clear. And then he said, "I'm going to put this into a book and it's called something like To Catch a Fake Priest or something like that. It's got on the cover, it's got the picture of a guy with a club chasing a snake.
yeah.
Um, it's
Oh,
very,
that's
you,
perfect.
yeah, it's a very short book. His books are very small and cheap, and it doesn't cost a lot. You might enjoy that a lot because it's quite funny. Tony's very polite and very British and very clear cut in his ways, and he
Mhm.
exposes this guy in such a clear fashion with a patience that I didn't have when I was reading through his stuff. I was like, dude, why you even bother? Just bombard him drop some nukes and tell him to piss out. It's clearly
Yeah,
he's lying, and it's a very good book. So you might relate to that actually, because yeah, I think you might enjoy that book. It's like, I don't know, $5 or something.
I
If
haven't read
it's
any of his stuff yet, so yeah,
Yeah, I think you'd enjoy.
yeah.
Start with that
I gotta
one.
get to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Sorry. So yeah, all these questions were being dodged. Yeah, all your questions were being
Yeah,
dodged. Yeah.
yeah. So that was in 2020, and at some point, I started getting more into your material, and I found the Diamond Brothers.
Yeah.
Which, man, if you really want to spiral into despair, follow the Diamond
Yeah,
Brothers.
yeah, yeah. Because the
They
Diamond
got me
Brothers do
they got me
they,
for a while.
they do a lot of good work, but the problem is that
Yeah,
they are heretics because they don't recognize baptism of desire and baptism of blood, which of course are in canon law and they've been throughout the church. So because of that error, they then say that anybody who does recognize baptism of desire and of blood is not really Catholic. So they're actually schismatics. They exclude themselves. But aside from those 2 points, and I think there's another one which they claim that Wojtyla, the fake Pope John II, was like the Antichrist, which I don't
yeah.
subscribe to that either. So they've got a couple of things that are they're a bit off, but they do a lot of really really good work in every other respect.
Hmm.
So I'll use what I can where I can, and if it's good, I'll use it, and I'll make my disclaimer on it. So yeah, I don't have anything against them. By the way, the interview, there was a debate between Peter Diamond and some SSPX guy, not even a Novus Ordo, and he wrecked the SSPX guy, just like beat the crap out of him. Like, that was very interesting to watch. So yeah, I've got nothing really against them other than they're in error about baptism of desire and blood. But yeah,
Yeah, simple as that. They're wrong. They do have a great video on Mary in the Old Testament. So if
yeah.
anybody comes across their material, that is a good one.
They've also got very good
Uh,
ones on the new fake mass. Most of the articles, I
mhm,
mean, in my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church, I refer to them quite a lot, and I've said it right at the beginning. I said, look, because at the time there was some, I don't know, they weren't, I don't know if it was then or whatever, there was some dispute about a court case against them or something, which I think they won or got dismissed. And I said, look, I'm not
yeah,
making any judgments on I'm only using this stuff as reference because they've referenced it so well. It's pointless for me to just redo their work. I'd rather send you there. And with the corollary of baptism of desire and baptism of blood are true and real. They are in canon law. So, but yeah,
yeah,
they do a lot of good work. I wouldn't steer people away from them. I just warn them about the sort of issue. And another person that has done decent work is Anne Barnhart. You have to be a lot more careful with her because she's a convinced Novus Ordian who's now a Sedevacantist because Ratzinger died and she thought Ratzinger was the Pope. And, she's got no argument. I mean, like, if you're a Sedevacantist now, what's the difference between being a Sedevacantist now
right,
and what she calls a 1958 Sedevacantist? It's the lapse of time. And I've asked her this multiple times. She won't answer, which is like, okay, where do you become a crazy Sedevacantist as opposed to a good Sedevacantist? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? Is it 47 years? What if Bergoglio leaves another 30 years? Then are you one of the crazy ones or what? Where's the cutoff? There isn't one.
right.
So. But yeah, so you got black pilled by the Dimon brothers, and then
Yeah. So like I said, about the same time, I was really digging into your stuff, and I found Believe, and I think at this point I really didn't need to read that, but I was interested in some of the things that you had pointed out in your videos.
right,
Um, and when I read that, I mean that famous line of Protestantism is the belief that Christianity was wrong for 1500 years.
yeah,
I mean, if that definitely cemented what I was, already looking at and believing. Um, so, and I think it was that same year you released Reclaiming the Catholic Church.
yeah,
I was really digging into the Freemasonic topic and the history of the church and everything that happened. Of course, greatly thanks to you. And I got that book, I think the same day that you released it. And I had it finished in 2 weeks.
oh wow,
But
that's impressive because most people, I don't know if they finish it, but I mean it's 530 pages of pretty detailed. I don't think it's boring, but then I'm the one that wrote it, so I can't say. Um, I, you know,
definitely not boring. Chapter 6 is very long.
yeah,
But I see why you're railing on that guy.
yeah. Chapter 6 is basically just me ranting about various
Yeah,
individuals that try and John Salza has to be taken down because he is a Freemason. He's an absolute demonic inspired snake who just lies and lies and lies. And his lies are so constant and so obscene and he's like black is black and white is white, and 5 minutes later it's like I just said black is white and white is black, and you can see that it just irritates me. So I just had to like that chapter could probably do with like shortening or something, but I wanted to be thorough with especially John Salza. So yeah, it
yeah.
took. Are you checking how many pages it is?
I was just looking at the chapter list because I do remember this like it was yesterday. I was scheduled to meet with that priest, and I had your book, I was having my car worked on, and I'm reading your book. I'm rushing to finish these last few chapters,
Yeah.
and he sent me a text. And he said, "Hey, are we still on for today?" And I wasn't even done with the book, but I mean, I was
Yeah.
so caught up in into everything that I was reading and listening to. I texted him back almost immediately. I said, "You know what? I'm good. I'm following. I'm into the Sedevacantism thing. I think these guys are right. I appreciate your time."
Yeah.
And he said, "All right, I'll pray for you." Okay, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
after months of studying and talking, it was done.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm very impressed by that attitude because it's very rare to come across that. I mean, I know I've done that myself a few times. Like, I was born into a fanatic. My dad was a fanatic of karate, and then I did it fanatically. And then I came across one of
Yeah,
these Russians that could kick the crap out of me without blinking an eye, and I was like, I just dropped it like there and then. I was like, oh, I'm gonna do what these guys do. Most people, that have dedicated a few decades to something won't just do that. But I've always been like that. I think it's part of my Asperger's type stuff, but it's very interesting. I find little children tend to be like that. Once they see something and they learn something, they realize the knowledge of that thing working a certain way that is not how they thought. They immediately take up on it. But adults are not really. There's very few of them that are willing to do that, and they're generally people that they find it hard to lie, to be deceptive. So I think, and as I think most people know, like people that are on the spectrum of autism or Asperger's or whatever, they do have trouble, concocting all sorts of devious lies. It's just not really our way. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I'm finding that, of course, with an autist, they can get stuck into like a wrong belief, and then that's just you can't get them out of that rut.
yeah,
But
yeah. I think that happened to me for quite some time. I don't know if I'm anywhere on the spectrum, but it's very easy for me to get stuck in two-dimensional thinking.
yeah, there's a little bit of that in all human beings because we go crazy if we didn't. We tend to put things in boxes, like how a light switch
Yeah,
works, and once you figure that out, when you go into a dark room, you look for the light switch, because otherwise, each time you'd be like in there for 3 hours trying to figure out how to make the light come on. So we tend to compartmentalize, and then experience over time tends to like fossilize our experiences and therefore our thoughts about things, which are not always right. And just because our experience has been X 10 times in a row doesn't mean that X is the be all and end all of life. It's maybe it's just a coincidence sometimes or whatever. But yeah, I'm very impressed by that though, the ability to just switch quite, and clearly not off the top of your head. I mean, you spent some time looking into this stuff, and that's very important. I always advise people, don't take my word for things. So try and prove me wrong. Check it out. Read what I've said and try and bash it down.
yeah. Well, I mean, I knew at some point I knew there had to be some work involved.
Yeah.
Um, I, I don't know. I don't. These are some of those finer details. I don't really want to get lost into the weeds because I'll be here all day trying to organize my thoughts. But
Now, don't worry.
I mean,
My live streams are usually very short, under 3 hours most times.
well, I'm trying to. I'm trying not to seem too foolish, right off the bat. Um,
Don't worry about that, mate.
I don't know.
Just go with it. Yeah, tell us a bit of stuff. That's the interesting bits. The details of a person's views and life. That's what makes life interesting.
I don't know. I was reading the Bible one day and came across the asking ye shall receive and seeking ye shall find.
Yeah.
And again, with E. Michael Jones talking about logos and logic, and somewhere in there, I realized, wait, there has to be reason and ration and logic to all of this.
Yes.
So if God is logical, God is reasonable, then there has to be a reasonable, logical answer to the questions that I have.
Yes. Exactly that.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm kind of getting lost in my own head now, but that's that's pretty much it. And unfortunately, I was still listening to the Diamond Brothers around that time, and so definitely fell into despair because now I'm thinking, well, now I have to find a priest,
Yeah.
and I don't know any Sedevacantists around here.
Yeah.
I just learned about this yesterday.
Yeah.
Uh, but luckily, you brought up Lux Vera. I did some searching. I found a guy allegedly was
Yeah.
a proper priest,
Yeah.
and he wasn't far from my work.
Yeah.
So I drove all the way out there and found this house in the middle of this big suburb.
Okay.
And I'm looking at it going, is this the right address? This is definitely not a church, but I see some statues out on the lawn. I'm like, that's kind
Yeah.
of cool. Um, and I go up to the door, I knock, nobody answers, and I don't know why. And I'm so embarrassed to say this. I actually opened the door and it was unlocked.
Yeah.
And I was okay. Well, I see some chairs and there's an altar, a beautiful altar,
Yeah.
but there's nobody there. And I step in. I'm like, hello, hello, no answer. Then all of a sudden, this alarm goes off, and I realize I've tripped their security system,
Yeah.
and I'm stunned. I don't know what to do. Nope, still nobody's in the house. I just step out on the porch. I close the door. I put my head down, waited about 10 seconds, and just went back to my car and I sped off.
So, so your
This
first
is obviously
experience,
the wrong place.
your first experience of Sedevacantism is a break-in. That's excellent. Lovely.
It was a petty crime, but
Yeah.
so I had to go back to
Trespassing.
the drawing board.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I had to go back to the drawing board. I eventually did find a proper priest. I told him about that guy, and he goes, "Oh, that guy? Yeah, that guy's a fraud. Anyway, don't worry about it." I told him about the Diamond Brothers, and he said, "Oh, those guys? Yeah, they're Fenians. Don't worry about them."
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after that I actually met some more Sedevacantists not far from me,
Yeah.
and good people. And we have a small mission out in Fort Worth,
Okay.
and or thereabouts. Yeah.
Yeah.
And every time I go, there's more and more people, and it's
Yeah.
great to see.
It does grow, doesn't it? It's quite interesting how proper Catholicism, real Catholicism, seems to be really coming back. It's quite the thing.
Yes.
We've got one question here I actually want to get to because I think it might be one. I'm not sure if I answered this in my book. How would you respond to the objection that Sedevacantism is Donatism? I think I have addressed it, but I don't remember. Now, first of all, you need to know what Donatism is. Donatism is the idea that if your priest or your bishop or whatever clergyman is not perfect, is not doing everything correctly, then he's corrupted the church and you have to ignore him. Donatism is a heresy. It's got nothing to do with Sedevacantism. We don't expect our priests to be perfect. We expect our priests to be Catholic, which has got nothing to do with being perfect. In fact, as Catholics, we know that we are far from perfect, that any human being is far from perfect, including the Pope, if we had one, which we don't at the moment. Donatism is a heresy because all human beings are flawed, including all the popes. Like Protestants often don't know this, so I'm just going to repeat it again. But papal infallibility is not the idea that the Pope is infallible. That's why we've got popes like the Borgias, which were like hardcore power mongers and whatever. And we had some gay popes. We had some popes that just did orgies. We had like all sorts of pirates as popes. Valid popes. And then we also had about 40 anti-popes. Now, the reason the anti-popes are anti-popes and the Borgias are not anti-popes is because the Borgias might have done everything wrong on a human level. They were after money, power, sex, whatever. But they didn't have rock and roll. But, the thing is, they did not impinge on what they call faith and morals. In other words, the dogma of the church. They behaved like absolute scum, perhaps, but they didn't try and change Catholicism. They didn't try and tell you that it's okay to pray with Muslims, which is what Vatican II does. And, so they were bad popes, but they were popes. From Roncalli, Montini, Wojtyla, the other guy that lasted only 30 days because he started to look into the Lucani, into the Vatican Bank. So he died. He was basically killed after 30 days. And, Ratzinger and Bergoglio and all these guys, they're not popes because they have done the things that make you an anti-pope. Roncalli approved two of the 16 documents, one of which has got direct heresy in it, and that makes him retroactively an anti-pope, like most anti-popes were retroactively anti-popes. Then Montini published the other 14 documents of Vatican II, so that made him an absolute notorious heretic, and all the other guys promulgated them, so that makes them absolute heretics. So it's got nothing to do with Donatism. It's got to do with being Catholic. There's no one in the Vatican at the moment that's Catholic. There isn't a single Catholic in the Vatican. There isn't a single Catholic clergy in the Novus Order. They're not. The fact that they accept, promulgate, and promote and continue to teach Vatican II as though it was Catholicism automatically makes them public notorious heretics, which according to canon law means they're not Catholic. They've defected from the faith. And the same man says, also, Kurgan, I want to thank you. I'm a lifelong Protestant looking seriously at the Catholic faith, and you're the one who first attracted me. You're welcome. And, be very careful, because I don't even like saying Sedevacantist really now, because it's almost like, oh, what denomination is that? And it's not. It's Catholic. But, the Freemason / Protestant, Judaic guys, Satanists that have taken over the Catholic Church since 1958 have physically got hold of most of the buildings that used to house the Catholic Church and keep pretending to be the Catholic Church. They're not. They're complete imposters, and it's quite clear to follow, and it's quite easy to figure out if you've got information, which of course they try and hide, which is why I wrote Proclaiming the Catholic Church. So if you want the details, I suggest get that book and read that. That'll give you enough to chew on to prove to yourself one way or the other what is the actual Catholic Church, where it is. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I can't seem to get rid of this little lung, I don't know, lung death, tuberculosis, whatever the hell. I've been to the doctor and I'm just kind of ignoring what she's told me, so I'm going to have to go back, and she's referred me for x-rays and stuff, but I'm just not very good at that sort of stuff, so I was trying to just fight it off, but I've clearly been weakened a little bit by my bouts with pneumonia and actual COVID in the last 2 years or so. So I don't know, I was trying to build up some antibodies, but God knows what it is that's making me a bit ill. For all I know, it's the crap they keep spraying overhead, so I don't know. Maybe they're just targeting me with microwaves. No, I'm not quite at that tinfoil level, but could be. Well, we have about 10 people or so in there.
That's a good thing about being Catholic. We thank God even for our trials and tribulations.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. What do you both think of Father Malachi Martin? I've spoken about Malachi Martin before. He's an interesting guy because you got to keep in mind he was a priest before Vatican II, and then when Vatican II happened, he basically wrote a letter to the then fake Pope, and I can't remember if it was I can't remember if it was Montini or if it was Wojtyla, basically saying, excuse me from the clergy, which they did. Now, I don't quite understand the reasoning behind asking a fake pope to excuse you from being a fake priest. But there was a lot of confusion at the time, and perhaps it was also his way of saying, hey, I've done everything officially, regardless of whether you believe this guy's the Pope or not. So, very interesting character. And then his book, Hostage to the Devil, which I do not advise people read that, because I think, especially if you're unprepared and if you're not a very strong hardcore Catholic yet, stay off Hostage to the Devil. It's a very good book, but it's so truthful in explaining about exorcism and possession and demonic oppression, demonic possession, that it makes you aware of a reality that most people are ignorant of. And when you become aware of it, you also become somewhat open to, to infiltration, let's say, or to being messed with, because it's like, that thing they say that the biggest trick of the devil is to make people believe he doesn't exist. It's kind of true, because while you're ignorant that there are such things going on around you, you're not a threat. The moment you become aware about exorcism and demonic possession and the actual Catholic Church, then you become a threat. Then you become something that gets looked at. So the eye of Sauron sort of starts to focus on you a bit. And then my suggestion is, when that happens, fight back immediately. Just like I said in Believe, you've got to spread the light, and sometimes that means setting fire to enemy encampments. So when you start, when you first convert, when you first get baptized as a proper Catholic, when you first start to see, you're going to get attacked. You're going to get like some stuff going wrong and some things being difficult and whatever, all the way up to getting actually baptized. Then you get baptized and you have like a little reprieve for a bit, and then it can start up again. And when and if it does, my suggestion is go out there and proselytize, or write a book or hand out pamphlets. So the more you get attacked, you're like, oh, you're attacking me again. Okay, I'm just going to spread the word more. And that sort of tends to get them to back off a bit, because they're like, oh, this guy's like, damn it. The more we poke him, the bigger the fire he makes, So, I've also bought his fiction book, Windswept House, but I haven't actually finished reading it, because I essentially know everything that's going on in that book. He talks about how there was a black mass done at a specific time, both in Rome and the United States, with a Freemasonic satanic cult, where they actually like rape a little girl and on the altar in the Vatican. And there's quite a bit of evidence that this actually happened, and the little girl is actually a woman that has later in life mentioned this, and it looks like Malachi Martin was aware of some things that happened. So, I am fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. I'm aware, a lot more aware than most people are, of the actually really, really, really sick shit that goes on with the fake Catholics that pretend to be, priests, bishops, and so on, and the sort of deep state Satanists that are, parallel to them, behind them, and whatever, and the kind of rituals they get up to and whatever. They are absolutely nightmare fuel. Once you know about this stuff, you can't unknow it. So I don't necessarily talk about it too much, but on the other hand, people should become aware of these things, because it's like, if you don't believe that there are child rapists out there, and you're like, yeah, no, that couldn't possibly, then it can happen under your nose, and you're just going to let it happen. So once you understand what you're up against, then you got to take a side. You got to pick a side. Once you're aware of the things that people like Hillary Clinton get up to, or the Clintons in general, and what they've been up to for decades, people like their the Podesta brothers and whatever. When you start to look at what these people are actually into, and the stuff that they're connected to and the things that happen all around them. You can't, if you're in any way a human being with a conscience, you can't ignore it. You can't sort of say, oh well, and you're going to have to choose a side. And again, it's in the Bible. Jesus is not like, oh yeah, you can sit on the fence. He says, if you're not with me, you're against me. There aren't three
Mhm.
sides to this. You're either on his side or you're not. You're against him. That's it. It's not like, oh, I'll just sit here in the middle. And again, in the Bible, again, God tells you, be hot or be cold, but don't be lukewarm because I'll
Yep.
vomit you out of my mouth. It's like, it's pretty clear. My shield is discussed says supposedly Satan was enthroned there for 100 years. I guess he's read the book. Yeah, which again is not, as Catholics, as actual Catholics, nothing really phases us. It's like, as Tony was saying when I spoke to him, when, people say, oh, can you believe what Bergoglio has done this week? And we're like, okay. He's not Catholic. He doesn't represent anything to do with Catholicism. You might as well say, oh, do you know what this shaman in the Amazon has done? Okay, it's not relevant to us. And, the thing about the church having been taken over pretty much, and, like not there being a valid pope for like over 60 years, all this stuff is prophesized. If you read Revelation or the Apocalypse, whichever, word you want to use, it's pretty much all in there. Plus, we've got Catholic saints that over a period of centuries, some of these people clearly were not aware of each other at all, have all prophesied this sort of thing, and that the seat of Satan will actually be the Vatican, will actually be the chair of Peter. So it's not, none of this stuff is news to us. None of it is scary because, we've always been persecuted and always will be, probably until the second coming anyway. And we're not quite have to hide in the catacombs, despite the FBI declaring hardcore Catholics as terrorists of some sort. And the other thing, Tony did the brilliant 8-minute video. So just do Tony Lowe Sedevacantism or something. You'll find him on YouTube. He did an 8-minute video where he's basically saying, if it's wrong, it's right. Because if you actually take Vatican II as being valid, then, well, if you read those documents, they tell you that everybody is part of the church. Muslims pray to a God, and it's just a little bit wrong about some things, but they're saved, and so are atheists, and so are agnostics, and, well, surely so are Sedevacantists, right? I mean, you've got nothing to lose because you're saved anyway. But interestingly enough, Sedevacantists are the only ones that get absolutely attacked by Bergoglio and those guys. You wonder why. They don't attack the Protestants. They don't attack the Orthodox. They don't attack the Satanists, for that matter. But Sedevacantists, oh, we're the bad guys. Yeah, we're the schismatics. Oh,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, okay. It's very interesting that. So yeah, it's quite a.
I was so proud of that FBI article. I had to send the link to my mom.
How's your family in general responding to this? Because if you were raised Protestant, and in America generally it's a Protestant country, so is there any what's the
Yeah.
reaction been?
Well, my coming out moment was we were having a family lunch at a restaurant,
Oh, lovely,
and
good man.
yeah. So we're surrounded by family friends, and my grandfather's there, my parents, and I mentioned something to my mom about going to church, and she asked me which church, and I told her the local Catholic church, and she gave me that answer of, yeah, I don't want to insult my mom in any way, but
Yeah,
she said, well, I mean, they believe in Jesus. It's all Christian. It's a Christian name. They all believe in Jesus.
yeah,
And at that time, I was just so relieved that we weren't going to have this big debate,
yeah,
and I was going to get condemned to hell by my parents
yeah,
out in this public spot. That I gave her a hug and I gave her a kiss on the cheek,
Excellent.
And
Very
next
good.
thing I know, well, it gets worse. Next thing I know, my grandfather, her father, is across the table, and he's asking, what's going on? Why did he do that?
Yeah.
And she told him, oh, well, he's going to be Catholic. He wants to be Catholic. And of course, the table goes absolutely silent. And you're talking like 15 people at one table.
So you
And
couldn't pick Christmas dinner? I mean, you just thought ease yourself in, yeah?
I guess that would have been better timing.
Yeah.
But my grandfather, jokester as he is, he said, Catholic? Well, I'm Catholic too. I'm Jehovah's Witness, and he does the sign of the cross, and there's Snickers all across the table, and of course I'm like pretty embarrassed by this, and I don't want to get into it, but it was a sweet moment between me and my mom.
Yeah.
My dad's staring at me from the far end of the table, just kind of giving me the side eye, and I'm like, okay, so he and I will never talk about that. That's fine,
Yeah.
I guess.
And how long ago was this?
But oh, probably about 2020. Yeah, it's probably been about 3 years.
Okay. And has there been any sort of improvement or change since then, or how's that going?
Uh, every now and then, me and my mom will make comments to each other.
Yeah.
Um, she was gonna watch my kids a couple weeks ago, and she and I were butting heads back and forth. She would give me her Protestant line, and I
Yeah.
would give her my hardcore Catholic line. It was like we were punching back and forth, and
Yeah.
and by the end of it, she said something like, "Well, it's in the Bible." She said something like, "God loves you no matter what." I said, "Yeah, but He doesn't support your false faith." And that's when my wife threw her hands.
Ah,
My wife threw her hands up and said, "Okay, hey, we need to stop right there. I just want to go have lunch. Mom, we'll see you later."
yeah. Good. Yeah. Sometimes it's good to have a wife referee. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
look, it's it must be. I'm very impressed with people like yourself that are lifelong Protestants and then like sort of see the objective facts and sort of it's
yeah,
definitely hard. I must look. I had zero religious thought one way or the other, and to be fair, my father has never even commented on it really. Last time I saw him, he introduced me to reintroduced me to one of his friends that I knew a long time, who's unfortunately passed away now, but it was the last time I saw this man, and very interesting character, and also quite funny all the time. And he'd like poke fun at you, but in a nice way.
mhm,
And he was aware of it because obviously he'd spoken about it to my dad, and he goes, "So, I hear you're religious now." And my dad goes, "Oh, he's not just religious; he's very religious." It's like, yeah, well, it is what it is. And he sort of asked me a bit about it. I spoke more about it to him than I did with my dad, because like I think the only comment with my dad was like, I told him, I said, "Look, that's what I think now, and whatever." He knows I've written the book. I doubt he's read it, but and he said, "Oh, I think maybe you're just trying to put like how did he say it? Almost like you're trying to define something in a very clear way that maybe should be left undefined." He's a bit more like a deist, sort of like, oh, whatever, agnostic slash, which I understand very well because I was that way most of my life.
my God, it's too big for us to understand.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, there's something out there, but hey, how you couldn't possibly give a crap about little old me on this dust ball of a planet, and grain of sand in billions of grains of sand in the universe that exist, and that sort of sense, and also feeling, my dad spent a lot of time in nature, like hunting and being in the wild and whatever, and that does bring you closer to the truth, to God, because you can't exist in the African savannah for like years at a time and not become aware of a life force and intelligence behind creation. It's just not possible. If you're seeing, that's one of the things that helped me go from pretty much atheist to, I decided that it was all nonsense when I was 7. But at the time I was 19, I'd already come to the conclusion that the maths didn't work out. And one of the things that helped me sort of lean a little bit that way was beauty, was looking at sunsets and things like
Yes.
flowers,
Yeah.
because it's like every sunset is beautiful. And especially, if you're in Europe, sometimes it's difficult to see a proper sunset depending on where you are, because it's a much smaller country. But in Africa or America, you've got vast open spaces and you can look at sunsets day after day after day after day, or sunrise day after day after day, and it's like there isn't an ugly one. It's like, why
Mhm.
the hell would this look beautiful? Why? Why would that be
Why would
beautiful?
we have why would we have any concept of beauty at all?
Exactly. Or a flower. Why does it have to inspire such, or music, and there's just so much beauty all around. And if you're in nature, you can't help look at that. And if you're a bit curious and a little bit autistic like me, I mean, as a kid, I used to spend hours, literally hours, just looking at ants, looking at what they were doing, and like, oh, where are they going? And like, oh, what are they eating, and how do they live? I even built like a little ant farm, which then I kind of felt bad because they didn't have a queen, so eventually they died. But they built the whole, I could see like the little tunnels against the glass, and
Yeah.
like nature is incredible. It is true what it says in the Bible. Just look around you. It's written in every grain of sand that there is God. So I don't think there's a hunter, and there are very few hunters left on the planet. But I don't think there's an actual hunter or a woodsman. Like a guy that lives out in the sticks, or that goes there regularly, that is an atheist. I, I don't think that's really possible. You can feel that there's something real there. And in his mind, I think, to put the whole church thing in, and keep in mind, he also had bad experiences with the church because it was the Noah's Order church, which is, he hasn't gone through all this stuff. He doesn't, and he just thinks, oh, well,
Yeah.
those guys are, they're liars and whatever. So, um, pardon me. But even I had some little bit of a pushback, not a lot, because, well, my personality being the shy wallflower type that I am, most people don't dare to sort of like try and make fun of it. But I did have the mostly relatives of my wife and whatever that tried to like poke little bits at, and I was just
Yeah.
spitballs at a battleship. Really, it wasn't anything. But yeah, if you were, if I'd been raised Protestant or something, I'd be so difficult. I think for most people it's so hard. First of all, to get your own mind out of that.
Yeah.
You've been brought up that way, like you don't know any better. It's like what David was saying: don't ask the
Well,
fish
like I
about
said
water.
though, that's the thing though. Like I said, there wasn't any kind of real Protestant upbringing.
Mm.
I had Protestant parents, and every now and then we would hear something from the Bible. Actually, I remember when I was very young, my mom told me the story of Samson and Delilah, and
Yeah,
I loved that story so
yeah,
much. I never forgot it from the time I
yeah.
was like 5 years old.
I quite like that story as
Um,
well. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's like prehistoric superhero story.
yeah,
I was all about comic books when I was little, so yeah, of
yeah.
course it
So
resonated.
certainly,
Uh,
the thing is,
but I actually think that's kind of the saving grace that I had was
mm,
I wasn't properly quote unquote catechized by my parents.
yeah.
I mean, I
Well,
don't think
no,
that they would have been
that's
able to
that's
because
you know
they
that
really had
that
different beliefs anyway.
that's definitely a positive, certainly compared to David the Good, who both his biological father and
Yeah,
his stepfather were both pastors in some Protestant thing. But there's another very insidious aspect of Protestantism, which is if you are raised in a Protestant country like England or America, the general zeitgeist, the general worldview of people all around you is imbibed in Protestant secularism, really. Um, my wife struggles with Catholicism at times because she does have a Protestant, and she wasn't raised in any kind of religious belief system at all. In fact, she learned the Lord's Prayer by herself, as I did as a kid, funnily enough, through some
hmm
Jehovah's Witnesses, weirdly enough. And she went there for a while to like see what they were about. Um, but the thing is, the thing about Protestantism, it's so black and white, and it's so mechanized. The whole point of Protestantism is to
Yeah.
mechanize human beings. That's why the Industrial Revolution was so great. Was it? Was it really? No. The Industrial Revolution is what mechanized human beings. Oh yes, but we got great trains and yeah, okay, so we got trains. Is that necessarily really a good thing? Is it? Can you say whether the
Also
automobile
took
was,
fathers away from the kids.
who knows? What if we didn't have automobiles and we just had spaceships and planes and we still used horses? I, you could fantasize about the stuff all you want, but the fact is, Catholic countries and a Catholic religion is built around the individual. It's built for human beings. So human beings fit with Catholicism. Protestantism is not built for human beings. Protestantism is built to serve a higher power, which, don't get me wrong, as a Catholic, you want to please God, of course. But you can't you can't please God by pretending. It's like saying, I'm going to be a good husband, although I'm gay, by, just pretending to not be gay. Your life's going to be hell. It's the same thing. If you're trying to be something that doesn't fit with human beings, with human nature, I was making the example that sounds silly, but if you think a little bit deeper about it, for example, most Catholic countries have got like siestas. In Italy, from
Yeah.
12:30 until 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon, nothing's working. Everything's pretty much shut down. Maybe self-service petrol stations are open. That supermarkets are open because people need to do their shopping or whatever. But you try and go to a normal shop at like 1 o'clock. They're closed. This guy's went home for lunch. He's having his siesta or whatever. And then they stay open until 8 in the evening. And I used to think, when I was living in Protestant countries most of my life, oh man, that's horrible. I just want to get work and get done. But that's not how people live here. I worked in England, and then before that I was in Africa and whatever, and they were all English colonies or ex-English colonies, so they're very Protestant idea. Work is, as my Russian friend says, a four-letter word in Protestant countries. It's just what you do to survive. You're basically a wage slave. Unfortunately, it's become that way in Catholic countries as well, very much. But it wasn't like that. It's because we kept getting secularized by the fake church and the infiltration of the Freemasons and so on. But in a Catholic country, even to this day, I worked in construction for a long time. We were busy building a very high-end hotel, build a whole building really in Kazakhstan, in Astana, and a lot of the high-quality door handles and that stuff was all made in Italy. The doors themselves were like hand-carved and whatever. And then you go and visit the guy in Italy that builds these things, and it's literally a little old man out of his garage who's got the machinery to, like, in his garage to build these doors. And you're like, I went there, I was like, what the fuck? I mean, there's like 2,000 doors, and this guy is like building them by hand. Like, and I said, look, but what is your schedule? We came here to see what you can do, and in the time, if you can do it. And he's like, yeah, this is how I do it, and blah blah blah. And to be fair, he was one of the guys that actually hit the mark. But we asked him, oh, can you push it forward? And he looked at us and he was like, what do you mean push it forward? You guys gave me a date. I'm going to hit that date. No, I'm not going to change that date. And like it or don't like it. That's what I can do, and that's what I'm going to do. And you could just tell that was, his son was working with him. There's guys that are doing that. There's still people here that do that. Or like you go to an olive farmer and he'll sell you his olive oil and whatever, and if you tell him, oh, you got to rush here because I need you to like do this now and I need the oil, it's just going to be like, what? I ain't going to rush for you shit, boy. You want my oil, you come get my oil when it's ready. That's it. It's like, it's a very human way of working, and which has its downsides. When you're in the mechanized system and you're like, oh, everything is just in time, and you get the average Italian that goes, no, but I'm going to eat my lunch now. Okay, I'll see you later. You're like, what the fuck, dude? We gotta finish this deadline. No, but it's 12 o'clock. I need my cafe, and you have to relax a little bit. Ciao, I'll see you later. Ciao, ciao. and you're like freaking out, right? If you're the average American industrialist or Englishman or whatever. And but the thing is that if even when you take these people and you make them do the tourist experience in Italy, then they love it. They're great. Oh, it's great. I had because they're on holiday, they don't have the pressure of the thing, and then they actually enjoy the humanity of it. And the Greeks are the same, even though the Greeks are not really Catholic; they're sort of Orthodox. But again, Orthodoxy has conserved some of these things. The average Russian is either more brutal or more humane than your average Englishman, generally speaking. And now the English they're hitting a point where their fake Christianity, I think, has come to a head, as I think is the case for many Americans. And so they're starting to be like lost sheep again. And paradoxically, in that lost sheep thing, they become quite soft. They become quite sort of kind and somewhat helpful. Not all of them, but a good percentage of them. So I think there's hope for them to rediscover Catholicism. And most English people have no idea that their country was completely Catholic until the 1500s. And great Catholic works, and the robbery that was perpetrated on Catholics by their Protestant mad impotent king was and subsequent ones as well was quite, yeah. We've got a couple more questions, but my shield is discussed. Are you now a Sedevacantist instead of Sedeprivationist? No, it's the same thing. If you've read my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church, I basically try to redefine Sedeprivationism, because Sedeprivationism technically was the stance of Father Gerard Gerard de Lauriers. It was a very complicated theory, which was okay in the 60s when there was a lot of confusion, which was basically saying, well, even though this Pope might have been validly elected, he's still a heretic, but it's a valid election, so spiritually he's not Pope, but materially he's Pope. It was a very trying to thread the razor's edge and the eye of the needle to give some excuse to then existing bishops, priests, and whatever else, cardinals or whatever, that might have still been good guys, inverted commas, that were still confused or trapped into this rapidly changing heretic church. But by 75 or so, it was really clear, and certainly with 60 years of hindsight, it's pretty obvious that Roncalli and Montini and all those guys were absolutely heretics. They were not popes in any shape or form. It really was clear. If you wanted to be as charitable as possible, you could say you had to wait until the end of 1964 when the last documents of Vatican II were produced. But by then, when the last documents of Vatican II were produced, it was absolutely clear that there were heretic documents. The so-called fake council had closed, so it was the end of it. It was clear by 64 that these guys were absolute heretics, and that anybody that promoted this stuff was an absolute heretic. So the reason I like the word sedeprivationist is because technically it is a more correct term, because the chair, sedevacantist from the Latin means the chair is empty. Sed is chair and vacant, it's empty. So empty chair, because there's not a valid pope on it. And that's true. But sedeprivationist means the chair is being occupied by somebody that's preventing a proper pope from getting on it. And that's more accurate. The chair is not empty, it's filled with an imposter. So I like the word sedeprivationist, but the connotations attached to it I don't like. And I think, to sort of avoid confusion, I think the sedeprivationist thesis, the Cassicecum thesis, is clearly not good enough. It's erroneous in that it doesn't go far enough into denouncing the fake popes as heretics. Some Sedevacantist or Sedeprivationist priests, whatever you like to call them, reserve personal judgment against these fake popes, because they're saying, well, only God knows the internal forum. And I've had this conversation with my priest, and I said, yeah, absolutely, you're right. However, we as laymen are not to ignore the external forum. If it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, swims like a duck, it flies like a duck. Well, guess what? You treat it like a duck. And these guys, absolutely behave as complete notorious heretics, and I will treat them as such. And he said, you're absolutely right. I can't fault anything of what you're saying. He's just choosing personally to withhold judgment on the internal forum, which is a very charitable, very Christian thing to do. My contention somewhat against that is like, fair enough, but that's your private belief, and you shouldn't try and impose that on anybody else. As a clergyman, in my opinion, you should be teaching these guys are heretics, which, to be fair, the Sedevacantist priests do. They mention that quite regularly, and they're in their sermons and whatever. So it's not like they're not doing that. But they will call themselves Sedeprivationists rather than Sedevacantists because of that fine distinction. I absolutely do not make that fine distinction. I agree that only God knows the internal forum of a person, only God knows your heart, but that's not my problem. That's God's thing to sort out. Just like, some mentally deranged guy can try and break into my house and rape and kill my wife and kids, and I'll turn his head into a pink cloud as fast as I can. And if then it turns out that he was really some saintly dude and there was some other, whatever, dude, that's above my pay grade. I'm just here to swing swords and take heads. And it's kind of like, I don't want to go above my station. So, yeah.
What was I supposed to do? Stop him and ask?
Exactly. You behave like a heretic, you behave like a violent criminal, I'm going to treat you like what you're acting as. And I'm certainly going to sleep like a baby about it. I'm not going to be second guessing myself for 1 second about it at all. Because thanks to my somewhat Japanese upbringing, Hagakure and like the poem of the samurai and Gorin no Sho and all that stuff, I've considered just about every crazy situation that could happen from a martial arts or guns point of view when I was working as a bodyguard and whatever. So if that shit goes down, I'm not gonna have to don't I? Like a friend actually sent me a video of this guy. A very interesting video. There's two guys. They go up to they knock on the door up. He's got a little video camera that can see what's going on in his corridor just outside his door. And this guy knocks on the door opposite, nothing, then knocks on his door, and then they start trying, two guys, they've got balaclavas on, and they start trying to kick his door down. They both have handguns in their hands, and they're like kicking at this door. I'm quite impressed because there's somewhere in Chicago. And, when I've been to the States, all the houses I've visited were built out of wood and gypsum. So I'm like, this is actually a concrete building with a decent door, because these guys are not small, and they're kicking it with all of their body weight, and the door is like holding. And then at one point, you see one of these guys kicking it, and then you just start to see bullets come flying through this door, just like bam, 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 bam. And he's got a door opposite him, and all the bullets hit just to the right of the door, like on the cement, on the concrete. Which, this building clearly has. It's not just empty blocks. I think it's concrete walls, which a high-rise building would have. And so it's relatively safe. He can see there's nobody else in the corridor. He fires like 5, 6, 7 shots, like rapid fire. They all hit the same spot generally on the wall. Doesn't hit anybody, and the guys run off. And my friend was saying, "Oh, has this guy done the wrong thing? What about?" And look, he hasn't done anything wrong. He's fired at an angle so that he wouldn't hit the neighbor's door, even though there's probably nobody there because they tried to knock on that door first and nobody answered. He's been careful about not hitting the door. There's two guys with guns. He's at home. It turns out later he's got his brother with him, and you can see a little crib in the background. So maybe it's just him and his brother, but his brother was visiting, so probably doesn't have a gun. What are you supposed to do? I don't think he did anything wrong. The guys have a gun. They're clearly intent trying to break in while he's there, which means they're going to kill him. They've got guns in their hands. And he fired, he looked for a backstop, and it was fine. If he had killed the guy, and then the cops arrive and they say, "Oh, are you so-and-so?" And he said, "Yes, it's me." And they said, "Okay, have you got a gun?" He says, "Yeah, put a gun down and come out with my hands up. Please don't shoot, I've been attacked. I'm the guy that called you." He steps out. "Is there anybody else in with you?" "Yes, my brother." His brother comes out with his hands up. And he did everything right. So if I was the cop and instead of missing the guy, he'd hit him and the other guy in the head, I'd be like, yeah, no crime was committed here. Just look at a video. This is what happened. You did nothing wrong. In Europe, you'd probably go to jail for that. But, the thing is, if you've assumed all of these situations, for me, it would be automatic. Like if I had to draw and fire on somebody, I'm automatically doing, where's the backstop? How many of them are there? Like what distance are they? Do I go for center mass? Do I go for the headshot? Do I do just triple tap like I normally would? It's all already wired in there. So if you've thought of all these situations before, there isn't anything to worry about really. Hello, Woolly Ram says, good morning, almost morning to you. No, it's not almost, it's well deep into morning for me. And my Shielders discusses, yeah, my parents can't get past, they worship Mary. Make your parents listen to a podcast by William Lane Craig. There's a podcast by William Lane Craig about worshiping Mary. William Lane Craig is a Protestant, but he's pretty good about it because he says, no, they don't actually worship Mary. And then he gets something else wrong, but he's a hardcore, very well-educated Protestant. I think the only reason he's not Catholic is because he says, oh, justification by faith alone, which is, of course, nonsensical. But I quite like William Lane Craig. And if you're a Protestant, maybe making another Protestant listen to him saying they don't worship Mary is quite a shock for them, perhaps. Hello, Matthias.
I remember being very young, and my mom was warning me about those disgusting Catholics, and she had already told me about the virgin birth and the crucifixion,
Yeah.
and Jesus is perfect, and he was God, and but then she was warning me against the Catholics, and I said, well, wait a minute, I see Catholic stuff on TV, and they believe in Jesus, and you told me all you have to do is believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
They believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
And she said, well, but they worship Mary. I said, well, what are you talking about? Well, they believe that she's the mother of God, and God doesn't have a mama. But you just told me about the virgin birth. I mean, he is God, and she is his mother.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not far fetched. And I must have been like 6 or 7. And
There you go. A child gets it. A child gets it. That's what I was saying before. Children are logical. They're very logical creatures.
Yeah. I wish I had held on to that logic when I was growing up.
Well, that's the thing. We mess them up. Like kids are. They conclude things very clearly. Even the misspeaking. Whether in Italian or in English, because there's irregular verbs and stuff like that. Like little kids will say, "Oh, there's the sheeps." Yeah, but in English you don't have the plural of sheep is still sheep, right? But why? It doesn't really make sense. A little kid doesn't know any better. He's learning to speak. Right. He says, "Oh, when there's more of them, you put an S on the end," and they naturally will say sheeps, which makes sense.
Right.
It's like kids are very logical. They're very objective. They because all they've got is reality, and they react to that. So, and then we put in all the bullshit ideas, and nonsense, and whatever. So, and I know my kids. If you tell them 2 + 2 is 4, they're going to try and figure out how they can make it 5. So I think each child you have to approach a little bit, uniquely as what they're like. So I don't want to force feed them like religion as a just because I say so. I want them to be able to understand a bit and talk about it and explain things, which requires them to be a little bit older. I do, it's very interesting. I notice very, very interesting things, like with my daughter, the eldest one. She's going to be 12 soon, and she now like crosses herself when we eat without me having to say anything. And when we go past, like in Italy on the road, there's very often little shrines to a church or a saint or Mary or whatever, which again doesn't mean we're worshipping them. It's a reverence, it's a respectful thing. Like you have a plaque for, whatever, General Lee or something. It's a similar sort of thing, right? They're a saint. They did something important, so you have a thing to remember them, right? Like a little, I don't know what you call those things. It's like a little, not an altar or whatever. It's like usually on a stand there's a little statuette of Mary or one of the saints or something inside like a little
Yeah.
box. Sometimes they're illuminated, sometimes they're just like by the side of the road. And sometimes when we pass those, she'll like cross herself and stuff. And and her, I'm very bad about explaining stuff to her, although can't be that bad because she got a 10 out of 10 for religious instruction at school. They've got a Novus Ordo priest. And as soon as she told me that, I was like, oh, really? Ask him about this. And she's like, Dad, I don't want to. I don't want to get kicked out on day one. But I'm pretty sure that there's two priests. There's a younger one and an older one, fake priest, Novus Ordo guys. The older one is the one who came to try and bless the house and has never been back since after I told him that I have a priest and that he isn't one. Very politely, but I explained to him that obviously he is not a priest. He knows it. I know it. I know that he knows it. Do you want a coffee? That was pretty much the end of the conversation. And I'm pretty sure he must have told the other dude, oh, just leave that one alone. Because, if you poke that one, she's probably going to come up and like convert the whole class. So, yeah, it's very interesting, that sort of thing. It's like they do pick up stuff by how you behave, by osmosis. So it's important, and I'm unfortunately, I need to improve a lot of things. Like I do pray more, but I need to make a thing of it and like do it with them and teach them about it and so on. And she's definitely old enough to
Yeah, I'm in
understand
the
this
same
sort of
boat
thing.
there.
Yeah. The little ones, the little boy, I'll be able to talk to him because when just him and me, we have he's got very philosophical conversations with me. He's clearly a student of life because he'll ask me about all sorts of things and things that you really don't expect a little kid to ask you about. He asked me about Jesus and like the cross, got a cross in the bedroom.
Mm.
And he was telling me, who's that guy? And like, I explained to him, well, they killed him and it's God. And he's like, oh, but so he's alive? And I'm like, yeah, but he's not like here. So they killed him, but he came back, okay? And he's like, oh, but before he started anything, before he started asking me, he goes like, I like that guy. Who's that guy? It's like very interesting. Like, I had a very similar sort of
Yeah.
experience when I was a little kid. I asked my mother to take me inside a church, and I still remember that image. It's still burnt into my head because, in Italy we've got beautiful churches. Now, I know this one was in Turin somewhere. I don't remember which specific church it was, but it had a wood carved crucifix, with Jesus on it, and the
Yeah.
carving was amazing quality of the of the sculpture. Was the thorns were there, the expression of like exhausted but not blaming and not bitter, torture that he'd gone through, the sadness of his, I don't know, it's a very, whoever sculpted the thing was a master artist, really. And I remember asking my mom, like, who did that to that guy? Who did that to him? And she was like, religious instruction nil. I'm not sure. I think it was the Romans. And my comment at age 2.5 was like, they should all be killed with a machine gun. And I turned around and walked out. And that was like my comment on seeing the crucifix. It's like, whoever these Roman guys are, we should like machine gun them all to death. It's like, and nobody had told me to, anything about Jesus or anything. So it's quite an interesting and thing that little children, my daughter did that to me as well. She was 4 years old when I went to see her in Brazil, and I went to the church. Her grandfather was like kind of he had the run of the church, he had the keys and whatever, he looked after the cleaners or whatever. So we went in there to pray, and and she was running around behind the altar because it was just us. There was no priest, and I was like a bit like, shit, she's running up behind the altar, and then I got almost like a feeling, you know, I'm almost told like, hey, you have to become like little children to enter into heaven, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure the big man upstairs doesn't care if she runs around behind the altar. It's not like she's not doing anything malicious, you know. She's just a little girl running around. And then I went to and I picked her up, and she goes, Dad, no, not I like him. I love him. And again, there was a crucifix with Jesus on it, and you know, again, nobody had told her anything about anything. And actually, I was like, for me, at that specific moment, with everything that was going on, that was a pretty pivotal moment. I actually hugged her and I picked her up because I didn't want her to see that I started crying really. So,
Yeah.
and I, you know, from happiness, you know, but I didn't want to confuse her or anything. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how little kids just respond to the truth. I think that's what it is. So.
Well, I'm happy for you that you trust your kids to be that close to the altar. I would have a panic attack if I saw my son anywhere near the altar. There's no telling what that kid's gonna do.
Well, you know, this was my first child, and she's pretty well, you know, she's the only possibly civilized one. Um, my little dude, yeah, no, that would be, like the Vikings in the year 900 when they were raiding the Normandy
Yeah.
coast. That's what would happen there.
Yeah.
And he does have a thing for money, gold. So he probably tip the altar over to try and see if there's anything under it. My shield is
Right.
discussed says, I don't know how they get faith alone out of by grace through faith, or by, you know, ripping out the whole of James, which is quite clear that you have to actually work, be, act as, not just, hey, I'm saved. You know? The Reformation is so illogical that I can't imagine how it tore Europe apart and caused huge wars between Christians. It wasn't because of the theology. If you want to know that, read How the West Was Won by Rodney Stark, and that explains to you very well what actually happened. It was all about money. It had nothing to do
Yeah.
with like the theology, the religious differences. Most people that went to church had absolutely no idea what the arguments were. The princes and barons and kings and whatever of various regions didn't want to tie to the Catholic Church, didn't want to support the church anymore, and they said, I'm a Protestant now, that way I don't have to pay anything, and if I'm a Protestant, I can take all your church lands because now you're the bad guys and I'm the good guy that's going to take all your lands. It had absolutely nothing to do with the theology. It was all about money. And if one is to believe Miles Mathis at all, which, you know, Miles Mathis gets quite a few things very badly wrong, but he also gets quite a few things very much right. And he does seem to do a study of genealogy quite intensively. And according to him, he reckons that Martin Luther was of Jewish extraction, and he was basically a hired hitman to do a number on the Catholic Church, which I think has more than a little truth to it, because one thing that always amazed me about Martin Luther King, sorry, not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther, not the black dude, the guy in the 1500s, the 95 thesis guy, because that guy was condemned to like death, I think, for heresy, and he was like in the same place where the emperors and these guys were, and he was just, nothing ever happened to him. It's sort of like, wait, what? You know, he just gets convicted of all sorts of stuff, and then nothing happens to him, and he just walks around and he does his thing anyway. And it's because he was related to these guys, and you know, I think there's a lot of whatever, he was hired by whoever to like sort of say, hey, we've had enough of giving money to the church, and which is not to say, you know, oh, the church was corrupt, and yeah, it certainly was. There's a lot of corruption in the church. I mean, back in the day, I think they said one of the surest ways to make a pious man become an unbeliever was to take him to Rome, you know, and see how the cardinals and bishops and priests like lived it up there. There's always been bad people in the church. That's not the point. And there's also been two types of priests and bishops in the church. priests of power and priests of piety. Priests of power will try and take money of you, Joel Osteen style, to build a church or to build an army back then or whatever. And yes, it's not the same as a priest of piety, but unfortunately you need that too, because you needed the churches and you needed the armies to defend the church and whatever. So, you didn't, in the world, you do need money, you do need power to protect certain things and whatever. So they had a function too, even though I'm sure it wasn't all good and all clean, and they had their own selfish interests in. But as a byproduct, you also got all the giant churches and the things that you did get that were positive. Of course, my preference is always priests of piety. My favorite pope was probably Celestine, because he was a hermit. They basically voted him pope because he was the only honest guy, and they were like tired of all the Borgia type stuff going on. And he was like, I don't want to be pope. And they're like, no, you're pope. And he like ran off into the mountains he ran away a couple of times, like to just like leave me the fuck alone, So I like him quite a lot. But yeah. Woolly Ram, Theotokos, God bearer, it was understood from the very beginning. Well, yeah, I mean, like it or not, Jesus, which is also God, did come out of a human woman called Mary. She was his mom.
Right.
There's no way around that, And it's like, and that's why he did it. That's the whole point of it. To prove that, like, I'll come down to like one of you. I enter the world like one of you. I'm taking on your sin, your human stuff. That was the whole point. I mean, there is a similar story about the tribal chieftain who responded alike after hearing the story of the crucifixion. Yeah. I think that he was referring here to probably the story about Mary that you mentioned. That it's like, wait a minute, it's plausible. It makes sense. Marshall says Miles Mathis also blew apart the English Reformation, and what a fraud Cranmer was. Yeah, but the thing you got to keep in mind about Miles Mathis is that he's essentially pretty much a liberal guy. He doesn't really believe in God, as far as I understand it, or if he does, it's that sort of agnostic thing or whatever. He's got some pretty liberal ideas about things that are incorrect, and that he doesn't realize the damage they do. His take on women as well, and his relationship, I feel a bit sorry for him in that regard, because he doesn't quite, and I think he's of British extraction, isn't he, originally? I'm not sure, but clearly Anglo-Saxon and not, he's not a spick like me, put it that way. And his grasp of relationships with a woman are, let's say, they leave a lot to be desired, and I think it's made him quite lonely, really, and probably a little bit unhappy or sad. He's a very smart guy. I've bought one or two of his books, and I haven't had the time and the ability to concentrate on the things he's talking about and research them in detail, really about physics and light and stuff like that, because that interests me, and I just wish I had. I don't wish it, because I'm happy with wife and kids and being busy with them, so I don't want anything to change there. But when I was single and whatever, I obviously had a lot of more time to read and dig deep into stuff. And when you've got a lot of kids and farm and a bunch of other crap that's going on in the background, it's difficult to focus on that stuff and to get the maths right and so on. But yeah, I'm being asked the question, what do you think of his alternative physics? I think they have merit. I think there's a lot there to look at, but I have been unable to delve into it deeply enough to check it for myself. But I think that's probably one of his strong points there. So I wouldn't dismiss it at all. Woolly Ram says, always makes me wonder if there was a Mason precursor cult. Well, yes, there was. That prepped European nobles for the Protestant Revolution. Yeah, King James. I know you mean before that, and King James was sort of after that, but King James set up the Freemasons and the Freemason temples as we have them today. So there is that, and Satanism is older than Christianity. You've got to remember that, because Satan got kicked out of heaven before so-called Christianity arose on earth, or became a thing. There's always been Gnostics and infiltrators and all sorts of heretics trying to take down the church or pervert it or twist it. Always were. I mean, it's in the Bible as well. They talk about, was it Simon the magician or something? I can't remember. Some guy that was trying to twist the gospel right from the start. Always been there, always will be again, until at least the second coming and so on. So, but we've gone on for an hour and 40 minutes. Unfortunately, my throat/lung phlegm, whatever it is that I've got going on, is not making it particularly easy to continue. If you've got anything else to add, or to share with the random Protestant that might just fall in and think that you're some filthy heretic that's going to the wrong church.
Well, going back to what we were saying about Mary being the mother of God, I also, in that same light, I think it's very easy to understand the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
It's very basic. If you believe that Jesus is 100% sinless,
Yes.
that means he also doesn't have the stain of original sin.
Yeah.
Which is, the stain of sin on the flesh itself,
Yes.
that we inherit from Adam.
Yeah.
Okay, so if he didn't inherit original sin, that had to be cut off somewhere.
Yeah.
It's very easy to understand when you look at it like that.
Yeah, that
He
Mary
only
had
could
to
have inherited that from Mary if she were also guilty of original sin.
Exactly. So yes, it's and people say, "Oh, you've added stuff." No, it's not added anything. If you understand that 2 + 2 is 4, and then you understand that 2 + 2 + 2 is 6, you can reasonably infer that 2 3 times is 6, and there you've created multiplication. But multiplication was always there. You're not added anything. You've just found out a little bit deeper about how maths works, And it's the same with Catholicism. It's like over the centuries, nothing's changed, but things get deeper. Like a guy like Thomas Aquinas that wrote like 12 volumes or whatever it is of questions and answers, and asked himself, well, if this, then what? What does this mean? And if we can figure this out from the Bible and the saints, the apostles, the things they've done, conclude that A leads to B, well, what else? Oh, well, if there's A and B, then, oh, look, here's C, and yeah, that fits. There must be C. That's all it is. It's just a deepening of the information by thinking about it, by applying it, by looking at it, by testing it. So it's not anything new. And to Woolly Ram, I want to answer one last bit of that question. I came across some very interesting work by a guy whose name I completely forget now, but I put it in the Kurgan TV, one of the videos there about ancient history. A guy who did a study of the Aztecs and Mayas and the sacrifices they were making, killing thousands of people a day to their sun god and whatever. And he had a very interesting theory. There was some symbology there that relates to Freemasonry, which is, centuries before any kind of Freemasonry and centuries before any kind of Christianity arrived on those shores. So it was very interesting that he connects that to some worshipping of Satan, and he finds symbolism of, I can't remember exactly what it was, that is parallel to Freemasonic symbolism as well. So it's quite an interesting situation there. Holy Ram says, which is why Our Lady's assumption into heaven is common sense. Her body doesn't belong in the fallen world. Exactly. Yes.
Oh, that's well put. That's very well put. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, again, Catholicism is logical. That's the thing, and it's
Yeah.
logical well beyond where the so-called Eastern Orthodox inverted commas, they have like, oh, they've got more mysticism. They've got like, oh well, that's mystic, and yeah, dude, that's like the people that used to tell me when I was a kid, oh, you think too much. No, 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 it's not me that thinks too much. It's you that doesn't think enough. Because a lot of stuff that you think is mystical, crazy, no, you can actually figure it out. If you think enough about it and you figure it out and then you test it and you check it, there are mysteries in Catholicism, like the Trinity, or, there are mysteries of how certain things exactly work and how we're supposed to interpret them. But there's a lot fewer of them than the so-called Orthodox would have you believe. So Freemasonry is only one inheritor of the lost Atlantean empire of the gods that was destroyed in the flood. Okay, perhaps. Certainly, I think there's reason to believe that Atlantis was a thing, and that Egypt has some relation to it, and they certainly had some weird belief systems about, mummies and what happens after death and so on. But yeah, I don't know. I can't say, but Satanism is definitely an ancient religion, and it was practiced all over the earth in many different sick forms. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was some secret society of Satanists that put Martin Luther up to, banging nuns and raping maids or whatever it was he got up to. So
I once told a Protestant that my religion is 2,000 years old, which maybe that's not exactly accurate, but he rebutted with, "Well, my religion goes back to day one," and you saying what you're saying, it's like, huh, Satanism?
yeah. Well, if you think about it, God was always there, but the first rebellion was Lucifer, right? Was Satan. And he
Right.
took a third of the host with him. And then he corrupted humanity.
Right.
So, what does he mean by day one? Exactly. I would ask him that. I say, what do you mean day one? Explain it to me. What is day one? Is that the Big Bang? Because there was no people then, so what does it mean? The Masons do
Well, they
use
run
the
into the
sun.
same problem.
Sorry, say again.
They run into the same problem with sola scriptura. You're
Oh,
telling me that the Bible is the only authority that you need, but it wasn't finished for years after Christ's ascension, and then it wasn't even agreed upon for 300 years after the church was founded. So I mean,
it's absolute
Christ
nonsense.
didn't give you a book; He gave you a church, and the church gave you the book.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, to be a Protestant, you have to literally believe that some fat German who said that you had to rape the maid when the wife didn't want to bang you fixed the book, which they say should be the book that doesn't get touched or altered because it's all the truth.
Yeah.
So wait a minute, he didn't create that book. He took the book that the Catholics put together and then he changed it, which you're not supposed to because it's the book, and then that's all the truth there. I mean, you have to be mentally retarded to be a Protestant. Sorry, there's just no way around it.
The
Like,
infallible word needed to be fixed.
yeah, and it was God breathed. And how do you know it was God breathed when Martin Luther did instead of German farted? Man, who knows? The example I like to use is like, but wait a minute, Bruce Jenner might want to change it again, and how do you know that's not God breathed? Or are we supposed to call him Caitlyn now that he's closer to God? What the fuck? It's just such nonsense. Oh, Matthias says, hi Kurgan, what do you consider Rosicrucianism is? Rosicrucianism is another branch of that sort of stuff. They try to, well, mind you, they try to recruit me into all sorts of things because as I think I've said before, I had this hobby of going to like look at all sorts of different weird cults and just see what they're about. So I was offered to join Rosicrucianism, and I was like, nah, thanks. You're a secret society of some kind, and if you're hiding shit, you can't be the good guys. And I was like full on Zen agnostic. I was like doing karate like twice a day type thing, punching walls and people. That was like, and wearing a gun for work. I was full on samurai mode. I wasn't like Christian or anything, but I was like, look, the truth is the truth. So first of all, you're telling me that you have to like keep some things hidden because otherwise you get persecuted? Fucking where? Who's hunting you down? Where? Who's hunting you guys down and like killing you or anything? It isn't happening, right? This is like, I don't know, it's like early 90s, late mid 90s, something like that. Like, no one's persecuting anybody, dude, not here. So, we're in South Africa and no one's chasing you. I've never heard of a Rosicrucian being like chased down the road and beaten with sticks like they're doing, Pakistanis are doing to the Hindus and vice versa and whatever. So now, secondly, regardless of whether you're being persecuted or not, if you're a man and you've got a pair of balls, the truth is the truth. Why are you going to hide it? I'm not going to lie about stuff. If I believe something is true, I'm going to tell you that's what I believe. Why should I hide it? From what? What are you trying to hide? Oh, it's like secret, not what? Secret knowledge, and so only some special people should have it? Like what? You guys got nuclear bombs into hand grenades that you don't want to hand out? What's the problem here? It's like they had no good answers for that. So it's like, yeah, you're a secret society. You're just a bunch of like LARPers at some religion. But knowing more about them now, it's just another diversion. It's another it's Gnosticism. The whole point of Gnosticism is like, I've got some secret knowledge for you. Here's the candy. Get into the van. I got some secret knowledge for you. Get into the van with me. That's all it is. Yeah. My Shield says Protestants say we can't use Christian tradition to establish doctrine, but they use Jewish tradition to prove their Old Testament canon. Well, yeah, there you go. Bully Ramp Catholicism is the proper inheritor of Temple Judaism. Yeah. Our faith goes back to Mount Sinai and the tabernacle, now perfected with the blood of the Lamb. Exactly correct. Our religion of Catholicism is actually some 5,000 years old. It's like what the Jews claim. No. Current Judaism is Pharisaical Talmudism, which appeared after Jesus. So they are the younger religion. The Jew, there's no such thing as Judeo-Christianity. There is Christianity, which, and again, also in the Bible, when there's some linguistic stuff about Jews, Judaism, Hebrews, and the people from Judea, which was a geographical region, and the other tribes, that were around there, who spoke Aramaic. So there's quite a lot of like important information that just gets trampled by the word Jews or Judaism. Whoa. Define your terms here. What do you mean by Judaism? Because what you call Jews today have got nothing to do with the Jews that lived 300 years before Jesus came along. And they can say they're the same people, but no. And all the Talmudic stuff that came out. I mean, again, if you read the Talmud, it's okay to have sex with little kids of 3 years old. That's not a crime. Or boys under 9 years old. It's not a crime. In fact, it's worse if you have sex with a goat than it is with a small child. There's punishments for having sex with a goat. Clearly must have happened, I guess. But sex with a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, yeah, no worries, that's cool. What kind of religion is that, man? That is part of your religious system. Now you can say, oh, well, I don't like that bit. Well, then why do you believe that religion? Why are you part of that religion? No,
Right.
and people can say, oh, but in the Bible there's like, whatever, I think, is it Lot, that after he gets out from Sodom and Gomorrah ends up in a cave and his own daughters make him drunk and have sex with him to have kids or something like that. I can't remember that story, but it's one of them. And it's, by the way, that story is one of the reasons why Muslims don't drink, because they accept that as being a true story, and it's like, oh, that's the evil of wine. It'll make you have sex with your own daughters. Which, dude, I don't care how much wine I drink. That's not really a thing for any normal man or any normal daughter, really. So, sure, there's all sorts of ugly shit happening in the Bible, but so what? That doesn't mean, again, humans are flawed. Read Hebrews. Tells you pretty clearly in there that human beings are flawed. But there isn't any. I mean, what does Christianity say about pedophilia or offending the little ones? That they better have a millstone tied around their neck and thrown into the sea. And that's from Jesus, straight out of his mouth. That's from God. I'm only a normal human, so I can't be that merciful. I think they should be burnt at the stake. Also because, being that I'm a flawed human being, and knowing that other human beings are flawed, we want to give them the opportunity to feel themselves burning in hell for 2 hours before they actually die, so that they might repent and end up in purgatory. You see? It's all charity. That's the reason I would be doing it that way. And I'm not actually joking, because even when I was not Christian at all, when I was this Zen agnostic samurai type thinking, I always believed, and I'm not going to go into details here, let's just say, asking for a friend, that type of thing. There's been events where some bad people had to repent of their sins, and simply being put in jail, or that wasn't really going to do it. So bad people that had to have certain conversations of a waterboarding type nature, that stuff works. And my intent, or let's say the friend's intent in this sort of behavior modification scenarios was not to be cruel, was not done, it was done as a matter of justice, because certain people will only understand the depths of their crime, of the evil that they've done, when they experience the consequences of that crime and that evil that they've done on their own skin and bones. It was the way I used to think about this before was like, man, somebody like did something to, I didn't have children, but if if I thought about it, like somebody did something to a potential child of mine, they wouldn't just get a bullet in the head. They would get 3 days and some ligatures to make sure they last 3 days while I cut bits off them. But it wasn't about my personal, it's not something I'd enjoy doing, but I would do it because it's like, no, I'm going to make sure this guy's soul, whatever that meant to me at the time, this guy's spiritual part of his existence, if there's any, I did believe there was something left after you die, and that part of him is going to change. I'm going to see to it that he understands that part of him, whether it's reincarnation or disembodied spirits or whatever, is going to know never, ever, ever to go this route again. And that level of enlightenment can be achieved through some struggle sessions. So, when I say that, like, I believe pedophiles should be burnt at the stake, I'm not kidding. I actually believe we should change the law and make that a thing. And I do believe that the burning of the stake is a matter of charity, because if you were to just lop their head off or something, there's no suffering there, so they've got no chance to experience atonement or repent of what they've done. They don't get that chance because it's a quick death. But if they're burning alive, it takes a little while, and they're starting to realize, oh man, this is happening to me because of what I did. What I did was, I now realize what I did was wrong. As a result of their purely, selfish nature that is what human beings are like, unfortunately. Wooly Ram says the corruption of Babylonian exiles is recorded in the Bible. The upper crust did not return to rebuild the temple with Nehemiah. See, Wooly Ram is more knowledgeable about this stuff than I am by several orders of magnitude. But yes, the stuff is recorded in the Bible, so. But we've now hit the 2-hour mark. Hi, Wooly, nice to see you. Sam is back. So it's actually 3 a.m. for me, so I think I'm gonna call it a night. But thank you very much, Caleb, for coming on and telling us about your experience. Oh, I just wanted to ask, so are you actually like baptized now and everything, or how is that? Where are you with that?
Yeah, I got baptized. I think it was last February, and I had my kids baptized that previous November. I think that's right.
Oh, okay, excellent, very good.
Just waiting for my wife to follow suit.
Okay, well, yeah, sometimes these things, and that's good that you're not harassing her about it or whatever, because these things need to happen at their own pace. And again, it's a Catholic thing, right? You can't force anybody into it. They have to come to it they have to choose it. So
Yeah,
and
I tried to lay on her about it for a while, and it didn't really have a very positive effect. So I
no,
backed
it's
off.
usually counterproductive. Actually, the best way
Yeah,
is, it tells in the Bible in Ephesians. The best way is to you be Catholic and you act Catholic and you do the Catholic thing,
yeah,
and that produces results, because if you act Catholic and you behave Catholic and you do the Catholic thing, well, guess what? Life is good. Things go better. Everything works out better because it is built for human beings. It is the religion of humanity, and it just works. And I've had it, but like David talked about how his wife led him to it, and his wife led him to it in the female way, which is very nurturing and loving, and it's like, oh, I like that, and it's like no real dialectic behind it or anything like that, but he's like, he wants to please his wife, and naturally as a man you
yeah,
want to do good by her, and it's like, oh, that makes her happy, okay, let's go do that. And then that's how the woman gets the man there, and the man gets the woman there by him doing it and raising his kids that way, and then she can see, oh, he's a good guy, he's doing everything cool, he's leading well, he's doing,
yeah.
so that's Sam
I
says.
think for my wife, she just doesn't really think about religion. She doesn't ask these questions. But yeah, I was actually thinking about it today. She doesn't understand just how good of a Catholic she would make. I mean,
Yeah, it's
when
not
I
an
listen
uncommon
to
it's not an uncommon problem. My own wife is along those lines as well, because and she, she's the thing about my wife is, again, that's why my kids are the way they are. Between me and her, they didn't stand a chance DNA wise. You can tell her that the sky is blue, and she's going to try and figure out how it's not. So it's like, okay, I've told it, but I'm also the way I am. So I'm like, no,
yeah,
I'm gonna tell you how it is, and I'm gonna leave you with it, because I know you're gonna like chip away at it, and then 3, 4, 5 years down the line, 6 months, whatever it is, you're gonna come back to me and go like, oh, guess what I figured out, and then I'm telling you now, I'm gonna say I told you so. I'm gonna do it then. The reason the reason I do that is because I'm hoping that over the decades, she's going to start to realize that, if I'm really clear about something, maybe she shouldn't try and chip away at that. And, we're both stubborn and we both have our own ways, but it's actually very endearing when she figures stuff out. Like the way she gets there is awesome. Oh, is that your kids in the background? They sound cute.
oh, you heard that? Finally, you heard that.
Oh no, that's
Yeah,
very
no,
cute.
my son is a maniac.
Oh no, I
He's
met.
driving his mom insane.
Yeah, no, but I love that sound, especially when you can put things in your ears and ignore it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'll I'll tell you one quick story, and then I think I really should go rescue her from those two.
yeah,
Um, there was a time I must have been really bugging my wife with all of my Catholic talk, and I mean it was going on for weeks, probably
yeah,
months. And one day she just kind of snapped at me and she said, "You know, you always accuse all these other people of not being Christians, but all of these people believe they're right and they think you're wrong and they think that they've got the one true church and you think you've got the one true church.
mm,
Everybody believes the same thing at the end of the day.
mm,
So what makes you so confident that you're right?" And I said, "You know what? You bring up a good point. Let me ask you a question. What happens if one day some random guy just walks into our house and he says, 'Hi honey, I'm home.'
mm,
And you look at him and you say, 'Well, who the hell are you?' 'Well, I'm your husband.' 'He's claiming to be me.'
mm,
And I said, 'Is he your husband?' She said, 'Well, no.' 'Okay. What if every man in the state of Texas shows up at your front door and claims to be your husband?
mm,
Are any of them your husband?' She said, 'Well, no.' 'What if every man in the world is claiming to be your husband? Are any of them your husband?'
yeah,
'No.' 'Why?' 'Because you're my husband.' I said, 'Exactly. Everybody can believe that they're right,
yeah,
but at the end of the day, only one guy is.
yeah, exactly
That's the
right.
Catholic Church.'
That's a very good analogy, actually. It's very cool. Yeah, that's very
So
good.
I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much for your time, sir. And
No, thank
I
you.
hope I
Thank you
wasn't
for your time.
screaming in the microphone or anything.
No, no, no. Thank you, Caleb. You know, there's so much more to you. I know that I don't want to, mention anything, but I know that I think you've got chickens and you've done all sorts of things that I'm very impressed with. I know a little bit, you've
Thank
told
you.
me a little bit about your life, and I don't want to say anything online that you don't want to maybe have out there or whatever. But I think you're awesome, dude. You work very hard. I know that you've put in a lot of hours doing all sorts of things. So I'm very impressed with you and your attitude to life. And I know that you're an extremely humble guy. In my personal opinion, maybe even a little bit too humble. I think you should, be a little bit more positive about your abilities and your skills and your things just in general. And it's good to be humble, but it's not good to not also objectively evaluate yourself. You know, um, I obviously err the other way because one of my mottos is like false humility is no virtue, but you know, I certainly don't suffer from false humility. But I think you're a very interesting character. So thank you for coming on here and doing all this. Just a quick couple of questions. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
sir.
answering the question. Oh, you don't have to call me sir, dude. That's just, you know. Kurgan, did you say something's wrong with your back? How can we help you? Oh, thank you very much. No, yeah, no, I had just a back injury that I've been stupid about. Instead of looking after it, I've just made it worse. And that's why I also delayed the fucking, the gasifier thing is, and now I've got a problem with the car is something. It's just all stacking up, and I'm having to like control myself to not do stupid stuff with my back. And I've now let it rest enough that it's healed, but now I need to strengthen all the muscles around it. So it's going to be a while before I'm fully operational, and hopefully I can get back to the same things I used to with the same vigor, but not quite there. And plus, I've had this like chest thing for a while, which is not pneumonia apparently, but I wanted to die, but I
Thank
wanted to
God.
die without antibiotics. And I've tried prayer and concentration and breathing and little natural stuff, and it's persistent. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And yes, thank you very much, and thank you all for being on the chat and asking the questions. And have a good night, everybody. Thank you, and God bless you all. I'm going to say good night now.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.